Hello again, gamers and gameheads, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today, I'll be doing something a little bit different, which I say quite a bit, but basically what this episode is going to be about is, it's going to be a bit about my mental health, and how things have changed over the last year and a half, and I think what I think has had the biggest effects for my mental health. So obviously it's going to be a bit of a serious subject for a lot of it. If mentions of depression and even suicide, if that is something that makes you uncomfortable, or not think you want to listen to, please do click off, because to give the full picture I have to speak about that. So let's just get started on it. To really not to give everything that's happened in my life, I'll start, I think, where a lot of the issues with my mental health first started. When I was a lot younger, I had quite a few different issues with my body. I have a genetic disorder called neurofibromatosis type 1, or NF1 for short. And what that genetic disorder does is gene number 17, which is responsible for the prevention of tumor growth, that gene is either mutated or deleted. And what that means is, because that gene is missing, you begin to grow tumors. Now, I will have to clarify, thankfully they don't tend to be malignant tumors. They're benign, so they don't become deadly. And what they will usually manifest as is lumps on the skin. So you'll have a lot of different lumps all over your skin if you've got more of a severe case. But sometimes you can grow these tumors inside your body. And for me, what had happened was I had one of these tumors grow inside my leg, my right leg specifically. We didn't know that is what happened for a very long time. I started having the issues with my leg when I was about 4 years old, I think. And I also had the problem that my right leg ended up, I think, 7 centimeters longer than my left. So for my American listeners, that's about 3 inches. And that caused a lot of walking issues. The easiest way to describe it is it's like you're walking with 1 foot in the gutter and 1 foot out. And that's what I had to deal with a lot of the time. So I'd had to have operations on that to try and stop the right leg from growing while allowing the left leg to catch up. Unfortunately, the operations never really worked, but throughout a lot of my adolescence, I had to have that. And once the leg started swelling out and, becoming bloated, they said, it's probably just swelling from the operation, and they didn't really investigate it until I was about, I think, 11. And first, I have to go back a little bit. When I was 8 years old, I would every day go outside with my father and my brother and whatever siblings came out at the time. At the time, my father was a smoker, and what he would do is he would go outside while he had a smoke and we'd kick a ball around. And so I had been doing that with the family. Even despite having the really bad leg, I always loved to run and I loved being active, so I really enjoyed these times, and I would basically give it my all. And that day, after that had finished and we were all heading inside, I went to go up the step onto the veranda at the house, which was a very, very big step, and I ended up losing my balance and falling backwards, and I landed on my right side. And so I was sore for a couple of days for that, and then after that I was running around playing football with my family. And about a month after the incident, I had to go down for a routine checkup on my leg, and they did an x-ray, and basically once they got the results of the x-ray, they said, yeah, we're going to have to admit you to the hospital, because it turned out I had dislocated my hip from that fall, and I didn't know about that until a month later. I had been running around playing football for a month with a dislocated hip, and I had no clue. So once they discovered, they put me in traction, because what had happened was the ball and socket joint, which obviously the ball goes inside the socket. What had happened for me, it had gotten dislocated from there, and the ball ended up on top of the socket. So I had to be in traction for a month. Then they did an operation where they cut out a section of the bone and brought it all back into alignment, and they used a metal rod to keep things together. And that operation consequently left me in a wheelchair because my body just never healed. And so from the ages of 8 up until about 11, I had been in a wheelchair and getting around on crutches. I was told that if I had gone and put too much pressure through my right leg, my bone could split right down the middle. So I think a lot of that happened, and I was bullied during this time quite badly. And I think a lot of that is where it started. And in the end, the only thing that actually stopped all the bullying was when I was 11 years old, I started noticing I had really bad sensitivity in my ankle. I always used to sit with my legs crossed because also having a bad back, because I have severe scoliosis. I used to cross my legs and lean forward, which would be more comfortable for me. And I had started to notice that when I would put my right leg on it was so swollen and it had no muscle. I had to lift it myself and use my arms just to move it around. And I had noticed whenever anything touched my ankle, it really, really hurt. So we went down and got another x-ray done, and what we discovered was my ankle had been completely shattered. It was badly broken, and on the x-ray they found a small white lump in between the broken bones. So I was down in hospital for I think about a week getting all these different tests done, and after 8 days, and I remember it specifically, my birthday was the 23rd of October, and I believe at the time I was admitted to hospital the day after, and on the 31st of October, which is not only Halloween, of course, but is my parents' anniversary, on that day, I was given the news that my leg was going to be amputated. They'd said, well, what had happened was the swelling in my leg was an NF tumor, and the reason my ankle was broken was one of the tumors got in between the bones in the ankle and expanded and just broke everything. And because I had been in a wheelchair for so long, the muscles had just wasted away and the tumor just took over, and that's why I hadn't been able to move it, and it's why it hadn't healed. So it was only after this incident when I went back to the school and basically said, look, the leg's going to be amputated. And that was the biggest thing I was bullied for. It was only then that the teachers finally took action and stopped it from happening. So obviously, that had been a tough time, and I wouldn't really learn that I had been depressed at the time until quite a few years later. But a lot of this is like establishing everything that was to come. Throughout all of this that had happened, I'd also been having problems with my spine. And as I mentioned, I have really bad scoliosis. And I didn't find out until obviously after all the amputations that it was probably the same tumour that took my leg that gave me scoliosis. So the tumour went right from my ankle all the way up to halfway through my pelvis. And an interesting note for you, my leg, when amputated, because of how swollen it was, I remember at the time specifically asking the doctors if I could be weighed before and after the amputation to see how much it weighed, because it was so bloated. I just thought it would be interesting to find out. And before the operation to after, I lost 17 kilos. And for my American audience, that's 37 pounds. And that was just my leg. And I remember before the leg was amputated, and while we were really going through everything, my mum got a call and had to sit me down and mention to me that I was able to make the decision for what happened to my leg after the amputation. And I remember the first thing, we have a dog named Spooky that we've had since I was about 8. And the very first thing I said when she asked was, "Can we bring it home as a chew toy for Spook?" And that had always been a coping mechanism for me, was humour. So I remember that was the very first thing I did. Just it was the first thing that came to mind. But in the end, I decided I wanted to get it cremated and returned. So in a cupboard somewhere in my house is the ashes of my right leg. That's the last little tidbit that I have to mention on that. But back on the scoliosis of my spine, they had been wanting to do an operation for it for some time, but with the issues of the leg, they weren't able to. And what they would have had to have done was give me a back brace, which would fix to one of my legs. But obviously, because one of the legs was bad, they didn't feel comfortable going forward with the operation at that time. So about 2 years after the amputation, they finally went forward with the spinal surgery. And what they had to do, because I also have very thin bones in my spine, they had to use a bone graft just to make the bone thick enough that they could put a medical screw in, because the smallest medical screws they had were too big to fit into my bone at the time. And at that point, obviously, since I only had the one leg, they still couldn't give me the back brace. And during that time, I was laying down in a bed. I wasn't allowed past a 30-degree angle for a month until everything healed. And after that, I was no longer able to use the prosthetic that I had been given. After the amputation, I had to do a lot of physiotherapy just to be able to walk with a prosthetic. And I consider myself very, very lucky that I was able to walk again after so many years, even though it was with the prosthetic. But after the back surgery and losing the ability to walk all over again, it really did take a toll. And as it was even harder the second time, losing that ability to walk all over again. And I think that's where things got even worse. So as I know this is like a long story to get into the mental health stuff, but I think these are all the events that really affected it and made it as bad as it was. So again, I didn't really know I had depression until I had a suicide attempt. And what we found out later had happened was I had dissociated. And what that meant was basically my conscious mind switched off and my subconscious took over. And it could, it acted on it, and I ended up swallowing wart remover and needing to go to hospital for it. Obviously, after that, everything started to change, and that's when we really had to get on top of it. That's when we found out how bad it was. So over since then, and that was some years ago now, probably 2015 or 2016. Around that time, that's when we really had to get on top of things, as said. And so, I started trying a few different antidepressants to find one that would help me. For a time, I was speaking to a psychiatrist, although I didn't continue that for long. I didn't find it helped me as much. But I ended up in that dark place for some time. And it was only about a year and a half ago that I finally started to make that change. And what had ended up, I think, causing the change was during another dissociative episode, I came across something which indicated that one of the medications I was on could be associated with suicidal ideation. And I think that sort of shocked me back, and it really clicked things back into place. And I ended up watching the lecture, and that medication is called Lyrica, or pregabalin. And it is widely known as, having a lot of detriment to it. I had been taking it to help with the phantom limb syndrome, and obviously I had weight issues as well. It is the biggest thing associated with it. But when I found out that it could be associated with suicidal ideation, that was when I said, okay, I need to get off this. And that was one of the biggest things that affected my mental health in the end. Originally, I didn't end up speaking to my doctor. I think this was right around when COVID started, and things were weird, and so I just went and tried to do it on my own, which was a very bad idea, and I ended up in the ER, having to talk to a doctor who then gave me the right way to get off it. And what he had said, at the time I was taking 300 milligrams of Lyrica twice daily, and what he said was to get off it, if you start now, take 2 one day, and only 1 the next day, 2 then 1, and keep repeating that for 2 weeks, then go down to 1 and 1, 2 weeks, 1, skip the next day, 2 weeks doing that, and then going off it completely. And that's how I got off the medication. And a lot of this also came with when I joined with Essential Personnel, which is a company who helps people with a disability to gain back their independence and to learn to function better on their own. And so with their help, I was then getting out of the house a couple of days a week. And that also, I think, just started to contribute to it. And it was around the same time that I went off the Lyrica that I decided I also needed to lose weight. It had been a confidence issue for me for a long time, as well as just a really bad health issue. And so as I made that one already big change, I also completely cut out any soda that I was having at the time. All the snacks and drinks, just completely cut them out. And I started to keep a record of my weight as well. And I've brought it up so I can at least show you the progress that I've made. Because again, this is one of the biggest things that I think helped with my confidence, was making this big change. On the 7th of May 2020 is when I first ever recorded my weight down. And at the time, I was 87.3 kilograms. And if you just give me a moment, I'll convert that again for my American audience, because I know I have listeners there. So as I said, I was 87.3 kilos, and that's 192 pounds. And my waist measurement was 124 centimeters, which is, I think, 50 inches or so. And what I had done, I decided every fortnight on the same day, I would record my weight again, as well as my waist measurement. And I did that from the 7th of May to the 1st of July. And by that point, I had lost 4.5 kilos in the space of 2 months, which is just under 10 pounds. And my waist measurement had gone down about 5 inches, or 12 centimeters. And after that, we get to one of the biggest things that I was going to talk about in this episode, which is when I started at the gym. So I know this is already a longer episode, getting up to this point, but as I said, this is one of the biggest things I was going to say in it. I started with the gym right at the middle of July. And, I wanted to build up my strength, and that had been one of my biggest goals for a while. And I just happened to be lucky enough that one of my support workers was also a personal trainer. And so he helped me get started at the gym, and I started a whole gym routine where I would start building up my chest and back strength as well as my leg strength. And, just to get myself moving and hopefully start to gain some confidence, because I'd start to feel more capable. So I continued on this for quite a while, and I recorded my weight right from the 15th of July to the 18th of November 2020. And over the entire course of those, I think, 6 months or so, I went from just 79.9 kilos, right when I first started, down to 75 kilos, which, again, I'll convert. That would have been about 176 pounds to 159 pounds. And I would like to quickly mention, of course, as a lot of people know, muscle is denser than fat. So people always say muscle weighs more than fat, but I put a distinction there because it's like they say a pound of rocks or a pound of feathers. They weigh the same amount, but they just take up less space. So my waist measurement went down by quite a bit, but the scale didn't go down as much because I was packing on muscle, so while I could have lost up to 10 kilos fat, I put on a lot of muscle during this time. And I think that was about when I stopped recording my weight every 2 weeks, because I was happy with where I was. Summer was just starting for us, so I wanted to enjoy cool drinks during the summer. And I didn't feel like that was necessarily a bad thing, as long as I didn't start gaining back weight, and I didn't. But obviously I've continued going to the gym a lot, and that's just continued to help with my confidence. And I think having that big boost to my confidence, as well as getting out of that mental health, was a crucial step to what I do now. And if I hadn't have made that difference, I probably never would have started this podcast. But obviously there are other things that went into me starting the podcast, and I owe a lot of that to Essential Personnel, because through them I was able to get in contact with a woman who works with them and had worked on an employment side, because one of the big goals that Essential Personnel does is they get they basically help you to look for a job, even if it's part-time, because obviously that is a big part of being more capable, so to speak. And so through them I was able to I think I ended up going down for a meeting where they were wanting to discuss options as using the internet for employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And so we did a bit of a brainstorming session, and we said all the different ways I could use the internet to begin making a job. And what we ended up looking at as a serious thing I'd start was a podcast, and well, here we are. But through the same woman who helped sort all of this out, she helped me apply for a grant with 121, which was a company to help people with disabilities start a micro enterprise, their own business. And she helped me get everything done and apply for that grant, which ended up being approved. And that was when I was able to get a laptop, a good microphone, and a good pair of headphones, as well as some editing software, which I used to make the podcast. And now I've been running the podcast for a good long while. And as I said, all of this, I think, started almost 2 years ago now, which everything's led here. Now, I know, as at the start I said it would be a lot about how the gym has helped my mental health, and I've sort of just gone into my story mostly. But again, as I said, making that difference, going and starting to lose that weight, I think has been a crucial step in getting me to where I am now. And if I hadn't have made that decision, if I hadn't have had that one moment where things just went and, clicked into place, then I wouldn't be where I am. I would probably still be in the exact same place I was back then. And I'm just so glad that I was able to make that decision, because I'm happy. I'm happier than I've ever been before. And everything, as I said, started just by getting off one of those medications and changing my diet, as well as getting moving. And that is the biggest thing for mental health, was being active. Because one of the problems I had for a long time was, I couldn't sleep very well. That the exercise didn't fix my sleep. It helped a little bit, but I'm now on medication which helps me sleep better, which is another part of it. But throughout the day, getting out there and moving more, exercising, as well as just building up my strength, all of it just made me feel more capable. It made me feel more like I wanted to be. Like when I first started it, I was quick to anger. I was just, I was, as I said, I was miserable, and I would very easily just go off the deep end. And I realized, if I'm doing that, I'm making others around me less happy, and that just affected them more. So when I went and I decided something needs to change, and I started to change it, I became happier, and I was able to then take more control over my actions, where I could make others around me happier instead of making them worse. And that I think is the biggest thing. I like to make people happy. I always joke with them, because when people around me are happier, I'm happier. And, getting out there, getting moving, getting out of that headspace, it helps so much. And yeah, as I said, it is one thing I think a lot of people would greatly benefit from, is even if you just go for a run every day, it helps a lot more than you'd think. Like, when I first started, I didn't think it would help that much with my mental health. But it's like getting moving, and you're expending your energy, and basically I think it does help release serotonin and the good chemicals that they make you happy, and that has helped for a long time. As I said, getting moving has just genuinely lifted my mood every time, to the point where now that's become my favorite part of the week. When I'm in and I'm going to the gym and I'm working hard, it just clears my head. And now I've been posting on Instagram, and that has just even skyrocketed my confidence more, because I was putting myself out of my comfort zone and started posting pictures of what I was doing, as well as like videos, and putting it out there has just by pushing me out of my comfort zone, and it's expanded where now I'm actually confident. I'm happier with how I look. There are still things I want to change, and I am changing, but this is the happiest I've ever been. It's the most confident I've ever been. And without me going out there and being active, I wouldn't have reached this point. That's basically where I am now. As I said, I'm happier than I've ever been, and I'm running this podcast, which I love to do. I'm talking about one of my favorite things to do, which is gaming. I'm going out, I'm playing games that I enjoy, and I'm talking about why I enjoy them. And I'm able to bring friends on the podcast to discuss games that we both enjoy. And it's something I really love doing, and getting my voice out there, getting my opinions out there has just further boosted things for me. And as I said, I love what I do, and I consider myself lucky even to have just the few people listening to what I have to say. Is such a great feeling, and it makes me feel good knowing someone actually wants to listen to what I have to say. And I hope to continue making this grow, and I want to start streaming when I can, and I really want to lean in harder to it, because if I enjoy this now and I can end up making it bring in some revenue, that's my job sorted, and that would be a great help to myself and my family, and it's the dream, and I know I'll get there one day, and it's thanks to everyone listening to this that I'm able to continue what I'm doing. If I didn't have anyone listening at all, I'm not sure I would have continued to do it, but just knowing I have a couple people who will listen to it every week keeps me going a lot. So thank you for listening to every episode. Thank you for joining me for this episode. And I hope I've gotten to give you a bit of an image on how things have changed for me over time and more about my life. Thank you for joining me today. And I think that's just about everything I have to say. We'll return next week with another Game Talk episode, and I hope you have a good one, and I hope to see you again. See ya.